Hey guys, Victor here, coming at you with another deck profile, and for today's video we're going to be doing an updated Danger deck. Now, normally when I'd be doing one of these, it'd be a Danger Dark World deck for the most part, but I actually opted to dramatically decrease the amount of the Danger engine that I'm playing, as I wanted to fix the Dark World deck up with a different supplementary engine that would actually still, accentuate its strengths and cover up some of the weaknesses that the deck normally faces, especially when it comes to the RNG reliance, which is something that the Dangers do. And that's not to say that I don't enjoy the Danger version. I just felt like it was time for something a little bit different. And as for what we're replacing the Danger stuff with, well, that's a surprise for when we actually get to the profile itself. So with that out of the way, let's jump straight into it. As always, we're going to be starting off with the monster lineup first, and we're of course going to be focusing on the Dark World portion before we get to the rest of the deck. But as far as the Dark World cards are concerned, the ratios are basically still the same. I haven't really felt the need to change them up all that much. So as a result, we're playing 3 Genta Gateman of Dark World. You discard this card to add gates. If it's banished and you have a face-up Dark World card that summons itself, this card it gets your entire engine going. Then to go with our 3 Gentas, we're playing 3 Snoww Unlight of Dark World. You discard it, you get to search any Dark World card. Really straightforward for consistency reasons. Then for the final 3 of Dark World monster, 3 Reign-beaux Overking of Dark World. When this one's discarded, it searches out any level 5 or higher Dark World monster except itself. So this will in turn allow you to access your graphas and your Sillvas just to be able to either pop your opponent's cards, set up your fusion plays, loop your opponent's hand, whatever. And much like the original grapha, this card can bounce your face-up Dark World monsters back to your hand to special summon itself. However, that is only for level 7 and lower monsters. So you can't bounce back like the OG grapha or the grapha fusion or whatever. It's just level 7 or lowers, good to go. Anything higher, can't do it. That's it for the 3 ofs then. And for the 2 ofs, we're playing 2 of the OG grapha. You never really need more than this. And there are a lot of situations where I constantly find myself just wanting to play 1, but because of how prevalent cards like Dimension Shifter, and more specifically the Bestials, because let's face it, if you hit by Shifter, the game is over, but the Bestials themselves, if they hit your 1 grapha, you're just cut off of so much recursion and just power plays in general for being able to set up the fusion grapha or recycling your resources by adding your monsters back to your hand, that it gets extremely complicated to actually play the deck. So you basically just need that second one there as an insurance policy to ensure that you just don't straight up lose. But yeah, if Bestials didn't exist, then I could definitely see myself just playing 1 of this card, because it really, in the grand scheme of things, while it is incredibly important, you only really ever need the 1 to actually play the game. Then for the other 2 ofs, we're playing 2 Sillva Warlord of Dark World. So this is much I played 2 of this pretty much for the same reasoning as grapha, where I would prefer it at 1 because you have very easy access to it in the form of Reign-beaux, but because of cards like Bestials, we have to be a little bit more cautious and play the second copy, just because if we lose the 1 copy, right, then we actually just straight up lose so much gas, because we're constantly relying not even on just the hand loop portion of this effect, but just Sillva being able to provide us with a body whenever we discard it is just so beneficial. So yeah, we would very much rather not have this 1 copy get banished, which is why we're playing at it. It's at 2. Then for the final Dark World monster, the 1 Ceruli Guru of Dark World. If this card gets Bestialed, it doesn't matter because we have other ways to get rid of our opponent's hand. But yeah, this is going to be one of the main methods that we use to be able to get both effects of our Dark World cards, being their primary and then the discarded by an opponent effect. So yeah, just discard Ceruli, summon it to your opponent's field, clog up their monster zone so they can't imperm you, and then it'll discard Sillva or something just to be able to loop their hand. So yeah, pretty good, but we don't need more than 1 of that. Then that's it for the Dark World. And as for what we're playing to supplement the engines, we've actually, hold on, let me fix this really quick. Production, live production. Gotta give you the authentic experience. But yeah, so to go with those, we're going to be playing the Fiendsmith engine again. So this is actually something that I've included in the past, but I haven't done as of late. And this is actually the supplementary engine that we will be playing over the Dark World portion. And what it does, right? So we're playing the 2 Engraver, the 1 Lurrie, and the 1 Lacrima. And it does a couple of things, right? So the Fiendsmith engine, just in general, can be played by itself in a deck with a million hand traps and still when you duel straight up, which, pretty good. But for this deck, its main purpose is basically to suss out any of your opponent's hand traps, whether it's Ash Blossom, Bestials, Ghost Ogre, I guess, in some certain situations, Ghost Spell, whatever. Even Infinite Impermanence if you haven't put a monster on their side of the field. and just weaken their hand to the point where eventually you're going to be able to combo off with your Dark World cards uninterrupted and just win the game from there. But if these cards happen to resolve and you're able to have access to cards such as like Wave Hiking Caesar to prevent like a Nibiru from coming down, it's going to be very difficult just for your opponent to try and do anything, right? And not only that, but being Fiend monsters means that they do have a little bit of more synergy with the Dark World portion. Not a lot, but the synergy is sometimes there. And that's not even to mention that these cards just provide you with so much graveyard recursion. So if for whatever reason you're like in a grind game, these cards are just phenomenal things to have. And then you can also just like synchro them into Chaos Angel, and like they do so much. So yeah, you know, that's why I opted to include it. That was a mouthful, but like I just cannot stress enough how good these cards are. I just tend to not show them because I typically want to do like a more budget-friendly version, which is what the dangers represent. And you know, like not everyone has access to these, which is why I also don't showcase them all the time. But even so, like their impact on the game just cannot be understated. Then that's it for the Fiendsmith engine. Now, while I said we are not playing a heavy danger package, we are playing a couple in the form of 2 Tsuchinoko and the 1 Danger Mothman. So these are the only ones that are guaranteed to do something every single time, right? As Tsuchinoko is either going to give you a body and a free discard, or it's just going to give you a free body, which is something that we can always take advantage of, as any 2 bodies will mean that we have access to the full Fiendsmith engine. And then the same can be pretty much said for Danger Mothman, as it's either going to provide you with a body and a free discard, or it's going to become a Dark World Dealings where you draw a card then discard a card. So yeah, that's why I still wanted to include these ones, but like there's no need for like the super heavy RNG stuff with like Jackalope or Nessie or Bigfoot or Thunderbird or anything like that. This is more than enough to just, you know, straight up win the game on its own, or just advance your game state, I should say. Then for the other cards, we're still playing the Gen and Ken combo as our backup cerulis essentially, but even if you're not going Gen to summon Ken, something as simple as like summoning Ken to summon Gen to force your opponent to loop themselves for 1 can still just completely demolish their hand, right? But yeah, for the most part, this is basically the same, right? You go Gen, summon Ken, you draw 2, discard a card, usually Sillva, and then Sillva will hand loop them for 2 more, and the game just gets out of hand once this card resolves. And then for the final card, we're playing the 1 Zalamander Catalyzer, just a solid level 4 extender. You reveal this in a Fiend, you special summon this card, then you discard the Fiend. So if you, for whatever reason, opened up this card with like a Dark World card, you've already hit a body on the field with your Dark World effect triggering. Or you can also just discard like something like Fabled Lurrie, right? So you reveal this and Fabled Lurrie, discard the Lurrie, Lurrie will come back. You have 2 bodies, and even after 2 bodies, Lurrie itself is full Fiendsmith combo as well. So yeah, that's why I opted to include it. And with that, that's the monster lineup, and now we can finally move on to the spell and trap portion of the deck. Now that we're on the spell and trap portion of the video, I'm going to say right now, I did make some pretty substantial changes, and the main difference is that we are no longer going to be playing Allure of Darkness, mainly because we just don't have the dark necessary for it, right? Like, while we still play many, the main advantage of Allure was just being able to banish the danger monsters that we don't really need. But because the danger engine is so low now, that means that every time we activate Allure, we're basically going to be banishing a Dark World monster, which is something that we'd much rather avoid in situations that may come up with this deck, because, you know, we kind of need those in our hand, right? But even so, I still feel pretty content with the changes that I made. So as a result, we're playing 3 Negates of Dark World. I don't know, like I just feel like this card is just too good not to play at 3, even in the Fiendsmith variant, as, you know, just banish a Fiend monster from your graveyard, then you get to discard a Fiend for free. And it doesn't even have to be like a Dark World card, right? If you have like a Lurrie in your hand that you don't want to normal summon, you can discard that off the Gates of Dark World and get it back from the graveyard with its own effect. And that's not even to mention that it lets you draw a card as well after discarding. So yeah, like I love this card at 3. I don't know why you would never play it at 3. Then for the only other 3 over in the deck, we're playing 3 Upstart Goblin. So this card just allows us to play a 37 card deck, which in a deck that does have slight consistency issues because we don't have to rely on the danger RNG anymore, is going to be greatly appreciated, as it just allows us to turbo through our deck a little bit more easily. And as for like the 1000 life point game, it literally doesn't matter. This deck puts out over like 11,000 damage each turn without even trying. So yeah, 3 Upstarts, pretty good. Then for the only 2 of them that we're playing in the deck, we're playing 2 Dark Corridor. So I was actually tempted to bump this up to 3 just because we are lacking in cards that guarantee us access to our Dark World engine, and this would be one of those that can actually just do it every single time, but ultimately I decided on just playing 2, which I feel is still perfectly fine for the ratios. For the one-ofs, we're playing 1 Dark World Accession to be able to access our grapha fusion, 1 Calm by the Grave. And speaking of Calm by the Grave, I just want to give a special shout out to those troglodytes from my last Dark World profile who said that if you chain Call by the Grave to the activation of a card like Dimension Shifter, it will not negate it. Obviously, you're wrong, straight up, and I'll keep bringing it up as many times as it needs to be said, but if you chain this to the activation of Dimension Shifter, you will be able to stop it. I don't know what was going through their heads when they're trying to tell me otherwise, but yeah, Call by the Grave, really strong card, and then it just helps you deal with other hand traps as well, such as Effect Veiler and Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. As for the other one-ofs, they're all going to be normal spells. So we're playing the 1 Triple Tactics Thrust, which is going to be typically our finisher just to ensure that our opponent has no cards in hand. And what you will be adding off of that is Triple Tactics Talent. However, if you're going second, you do have a couple of other options, such as Card Destruction, just to be able to get rid of your whole hand and then trigger a million effects, or Fiendsmith Tract, which, you know, just gives you access to any of your Fiendsmith monsters, so, or even Fabled Lurrie if you want it. And that's it for the spells, and then for the traps, we're playing the 1 Fiendsmith in Paradise so that we can send it off of Lacrima and then have like another disruption during our opponent's turn by banishing this and then sending Desert Ray. So with that, that's the main deck, 40 cards like always. Now we can finally move on to the extra deck. Now that we're on the extra deck portion of the video, we're going to be starting off with the Link monsters first, and as a result, we're playing the 1 Fiendsmith Requiem to bring out either our Lacrima or our Engravers from our deck. We're playing the Fiendsmith Sequence, which will allow us to special summon Desert Ray by shuffling back our light fiend monsters. And then we're playing the Moon of the Closed Heaven, which allows us to turn any 2 monsters that are effect monsters into full Fiendsmith combo. Pretty straightforward for the links. You basically play this in every single deck that has the Fiendsmith cards in it, right? Then for the other Link monsters, we're still playing the 1 Akashic Magician just to be able to bounce back cards like ceruli back to our hand after we give them to our opponent. So it is pretty important that when you're placing a card in their extra or on their side of the field, that it's directly under their extra monster zones so that Akashic can actually bounce it back. Then we're playing Knightmare Phoenix just as like a good generic card that allows us to destroy back row. We're playing the IP Masquerena, which is a phenomenal end board piece, especially after we get hit by something like Droll and Lockbird, for example, or even like something like Lancia can hurt to like an extent because you can't take advantage of your Gates of Dark World, right? So yeah, having something like this to be able to fall back on in case of emergency is always great, and what you're going to be making off of that is SP Little Knight. Then for the final Link 2, we're playing 1 Muckraker from the Underworld. You discard a card, then you get to special summon back any Fiend monster. So, you know, pretty solid. And then for the final Link monster, we're still playing 1 Abawaku, the Lightless Shadow. Typically, when this card gets brought out, the game's already over anyways, but this is a Fiend deck, so you're not going to be like struggling to make it or anything. And its effect is still pretty solid. You just discard a card, but it's for cost, so you won't be able to trigger your Dark World monsters. But even so, you get either a free Reborn or a free Pop, so it just makes for a fantastic end board piece. And that's it for the links. And then for the exceeds, we're playing 1 number 60 Dugaris the Timeless. We play plenty of level 4s, so that means we can make this card fairly easily. And it really does come up a lot, especially for those hands where something like Lacrima ends up getting negated when it's trying to Foolish and Engraver, for example. So yeah, this card just basically allows you to go with like a backup plan to let you draw more and then discard a card. So yeah, Dugaris, pretty solid. We're playing the Wave High King Caesar so that we can beat Nibiru if our Fiendsmith engine goes uninterrupted. And then we're also playing the 1 Zombie Vampire. By far, this is probably the most cuttable card, but I wanted something in the deck that we could play just in case we did get hit by Droll and Lockbird, because that card just completely demolishes us, right? But if you wanted to cut this card, you absolutely could. I'd probably recommend playing a Typhon over this, but that's just me. I don't know. Then that's it for the exceeds. For the synchros, we're just playing the 1 Chaos Angel. If you're playing the Fiendsmith engine, you got to play the Chaos Angel, right? As it's pretty much like the be-all end-all that you can always make to break any board for the most part. But since we play Muckraker from the Underworld, we also have the added benefit of just being able to like special summon this the first time, link it off into Muckraker, then bring it back and banish again. So yeah, this card's a little silly. And then for the fusions, we're playing the Desiree, which we can summon off the sequence, but we're probably going to send it off the Paradise. And then the 1 OG Grapha Dragon of Overlord to round it all out, as it's like a pseudo Omni-Negate. And with that, that's the deck profile. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys next time. See ya!